Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk.
Hello, Michael. How are you this afternoon?
Hey, Barry. I'm good. Hope you are as well.
I'm doing very well. Happy to be here talking with you and talking about this week. We're going to be talking about editor and writer about technology. Well, former editor of the New Inquiry, an overall writer at large about technology, art, and philosophy. He is our brother from another mother. His name is Rob Horning. We're going to be talking about a post he did on his Substack. March 29th, we'll have a link. We'll have a link where we usually have links, so you can read it yourself. It is called, this particular Substack post is called No One's Version. And it is about, and we're going to talk about what it's about in a moment. Is there anything else to say about Rob Horning besides he writes about technology, art, and philosophy? If not, Michael, I'll proceed and talk a little bit about the situation that Horning is responding to.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is that this is March 29th, 24. This is actually
24,
a year
last
old.
year. So it's a year old.
To me makes it a little more interesting because this is just a slightly less developed AI conversation, maybe. So it's that much more.
That's very important. So we have been talking about AI off and on for a couple episodes now, right? I mean, and in several episodes talking about AI and its meaning for the culture as a cultural transformative agent, in the culture. We've been talking about that kind of squarely, but also tangentially for more than a few episodes. And some of the stuff we've been reading has been very up to date and key to discussions of really, really contemporary technology. In a way, this is going a little bit back. Things are moving so quickly that the particular technology that he's talking about probably isn't cutting edge. I guess that's all I'm saying. Probably there's an even more advanced version of this technology. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because we're going to talk about the implications, as Horning does, of this particular technology.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Let's do it. So what is the name? Here it is. So this is about, I mean, I introduced this as an essay about AI, but what Horning does that's really valuable, and I think we'll try and, engage it, is that in the process of talking about this new OpenAI video generating model, Sora is the name, Sora. In his brief Substack entry where he's talking about this video generating model, and this new, basically very similar to ChatGPT AI. As he talks about it, he's raising larger questions of why do we listen to music? What is the purpose of music? What are the aims of music? So he's asking some deep philosophical questions and trying to connect it to this particular contemporary development of a new video generating of a new open AI source. Okay, without any further ado, let's talk about Sora and let's talk about what I'm sorry.
Suno.
Oh, you know what? Did I miss?
No, I think so. You
got it wrong. The video generating model
is
Sora, but what he is particularly talking about is Suno, a music generating
and so
model. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's actually the right way to begin the discussion, though, because his Sora is a technology that will generate video, and he uses that as a bridge to talk about Suno. And there was recently, and I don't recall what it was. I wasn't thinking we were going to talk about this today, so I'm sorry if this is a little broad. But there was recently a thing about AI generated video that was so there was somebody had done a clip. Maybe you know about this. Somebody had done a video project that was fully AI, about, the apocalypse and the end of the world. And they showed a series of clips about, um, you know, different video clips that were all AI generated that were so convincing that it becomes increasingly difficult to determine the line between, authentic user generated, something that you or I would make video, and how good the AI is, how convincing it is. And he uses the discussion of Sora as a way of talking about this program, Suno. And Suno is a program, an AI that you can use to write songs for you based on text prompts. And so I'll give you an example. I pulled the Suno website up here, and let me actually refresh it to see if it runs through the list again. So it says, make any song you can imagine. Start with a simple
Right.
prompt or dive into our pro editing tools. Your next track is a song away. So it says, create a beach house song about quitting your job, right? The next one here is create a country song about my friend Jess being late again. So the idea is that you can give this, create a jazz song about watering my plants. You can give this thing textual prompts, and it will then generate a song along the lines that it understands your prompts to be looking for.
I'm really happy that you did this because I think the rest of my opening spiel here is going to flow like water. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm
You're,
good.
you're
I
okay.
thought that, but
All
I
right.
guess what I'm saying is I thought that the Sora is obviously a predecessor, or seems to be a predecessor to Suno. And so he's using that to talk about, okay, so we've got this thing that's beloved by so many, beloved to so many people, is the significance, both personally and culturally, of pop music, essentially. And we have this thing now
That will allow
which
us.
lets us do what our deepest impulses try to do anyway, right? Which is create this bond and this connection to the music. And I think part of his question is, what happens if we actually do this? Do we want to be
That's
doing this?
absolutely
What
right.
what are the results? So I'll let you continue.
Well, no, you set me up perfectly. I'm very grateful for it. And now I'm going to basically, from the opening article, I'm going to cherry pick a couple quotes that, in describing it, what I noticed, I think what you'll notice here, Michael, when I read you these quotes, that along with the description of the technology and the technology's capability and what the technology allows fans to do, along with it, you're going to get a lot from the very start. You're going to get a lot of Rob Horning describing why he doesn't think this is a good idea. So, like, his description it contains his polemic. So, we're going to get a little bit, as I outline his description of what Suno does, you're going to get some of the issues that he has with the technology and some of the reasons why he's concerned with it. Before I read the quotes, I'll just say one thing, that just underscoring what you said, because this is a big picture critique, and you already said it. The idea of reducing music to a text generated, to a linguistic idea. It's just some, to a
Connecting it to
purposeful concept or idea or linguistic statement, a linguistic utterance that he feels gets music wrong fundamentally. So I just throwing that out there. We're going to return to it, but
yeah.
more of his descriptions of the technology that come laden with his critiques of the technology when it allows fans. Okay. Where the super fans are exercising now, because of this technology, the super fans are exercising their judgment about what their favorite band might have done or should have done by making their own new versions of songs. Generative models are, and this is his critique of it, he feels that the general models are basically creating a, quote, lifeless simulation through applied statistics, averaging a performer's varying levels of inspiration into a flat, static, I think he doesn't say static, but I think that's what he means. A flat constant. Um, and more description, that's really a critique from the same opening of the argument or from a similar closely proximate, he unloads all this stuff at the beginning of the article. Any song from any time, now this technology can allow any song from any time can be understood as a provisional version. I'm reading now, quoting, as a provisional version, waiting for each individual listener to complete it in their own idiosyncratic ways. Eventually, this may require no technical sophistication or know-how or expertise whatsoever. One will only have to use natural language to tell a piece of software what modifications are sought. So, uh, what's laid in that, like I said, the description contains his criticisms. You can see the way that he fears that in the semblance of under the guise of democracy, and everyone could do it under the guise of DUI.
Not DUI.
I'm sorry,
DIY.
DIY. Under the guise of DIY, what we're getting is a kind of revenge of the ignorant, the revenge of the amateur, right? Okay, there's that. And with just one more passage.
Sure.
The impulse to be a superfan, okay, confronted with Suno, a music generating model, and he's mostly talking about an article about the music generating model. He's himself referencing a Rolling Stone article that you can read more of in the link when you click on the link that we'll provide, an article in Rolling Stone by Brian Hyatt. I'll go back and reread the sentence. Confronted with Suno, a music generating model detailed in this Rolling Stone article by Brian Hyatt, click here, one could come to the same conclusion. The impulse to be a superfan and imagine alternative and expansive possibilities for the music one loves, he fears, reading again, quoting again, he fears that this will turn into a, quote, recursive solipsism in which one can no longer, this is like his dystopian moment. Let me read it with the appropriate fear and contempt and anxiety, right? He worries that the technology will turn into a, quote, recursive solipsism in which one can no longer conceive of hearing anything but one's own immediately gratified whims. From one, okay, more fear and trembling in Rob Horning land. One more sentence. From wanting to hear more from an artist, one supplants, armed with his technology, right? One supplants the artist altogether, overriding their choices and treating them, the artist, as disposable.
Right.
Quote, more or less arbitrary material for the greedy consumers. He doesn't say that. He says one, but I think that's what he means. One's own choices. Okay, I think that gives us a lot to comment on.
It does. So, on one hand, this sounds like sort of hyperbolic gatekeeping, right? We need to let the pros, let the experts do their work. If we let the amateurs make
If
the
you let
connections.
everybody impose their cockamamie ideas, Barry Falk's desire to have jazz music that
About Barry
encourages
Falk.
him to grow. Well, in a way, it's not even Barry Falk. It's the ultimate trivia about Barry Falk. Barry Falk is trying to grow tomatoes. I want to have a song about growing tomatoes right now. As
Right.
I do this, the
So
mundane everyday Barry Falk tomato planter.
I'm
Tomato
gonna
garden.
play devil's advocate here for a
Okay,
second, because
please.
my position on this has shifted a few times. So my first question, and I think you're well positioned to sort of saddle up next to Mr. Horning and make this argument. And if
All
not,
right,
I'll
let's
just ask
do it.
you,
Let's do it.
what's so wrong
What's so
about
wrong?
Barry Falk having a song about Barry Falk growing tomatoes? Why is that a problem? if we are to assume that somehow the song about Barry Falk growing tomatoes is derivative of the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil, right?
I
Why?
want to do that right now.
You do, and that's the point. But my question for you, because
Yeah,
it's not here, Horning's problem is this: it's not that there's something inherently wrong with a song about Barry Falk growing tomatoes. That's not the
I think
problem.
I was okay. Please,
The
please.
problem is that Barry Falk wants Mick Jagger to sing about Barry Falk growing tomatoes. That's the problem. And I don't, quite frankly, there's a couple reasons why. I know this sounds absurd, right? But explain to me, if you can, why that's a problem.
Okay, I am going to
Because
take.
I think, let me say one more thing. I think,
Please,
I think,
you're on a roll. I'm not going to. I
I
love this
think,
idea,
I
and
have a
I want to have
feeling,
Suno do this right now.
I have a feeling
Mhm.
that there are 100 different versions of this problem that we have already ignored and moved on from. So I want to know why Mick Jagger can't reimagine Sympathy for the Devil with the horns from Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire about you growing tomatoes.
Well, why can't I pick and choose
Yeah,
among music history? Okay, I have two comments on this, and uh, I'm not going to I'm not going to hog too much time on this, Michael, because my second comment on this is going to segue to one of our
sure.
closing points. But my first comment is a tentative half answer to your question or a response to your question. Um, what is wrong with having Barry Falk use technology, since we now have it?
Right.
What is wrong with having Barry Falk basically do what the 20th century has been doing in every artistic field, with or without technology, with or without up-to-date digital technology? The 20th century, beginning in the 19th century, arguably with Mallarmé, but continuing through into the 21st century, we have been mixing and matching elements in perception. That's
Exactly.
what we've been doing.
Exactly.
Sometimes we use technology. Now we use digital technology. But the collage, basically, I hear part of your question is, why can't Barry Falk make a collage? And I think the answer to that,
Using a template
using a template,
from
using
somebody
a
else.
template of previous art.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. Everybody has, if you don't let Barry Falk use his technology, is it the end of the world? No. But you are depriving me of, I don't know if it's my right, but it does seem a little bit unfair that Barry is being denied this when literally that has been the standard dominant practice, I dare say,
Hmm.
dominant practice in artistic and cultural fields of all sorts for over 100 years. Okay, so there's that. And then I also want to address, okay, and I'm going to move on from this, the first point, to make another point that right now I'm criticizing Horning, but I'm going to make a defense
Sure,
that
sure,
kind
sure.
of takes us to his some of his money points at the end. But
Hmm.
okay, but one more criticism. Um, and you already implied it was already implied in your question, Michael. The other criticism that I think he levied against them is what harm is it going to do when I make and I really want to do it now that you mention it. I want to have horn arrangement from Alan Toussaint. I want to have the rhythm track of Sympathy for the Devil. And then we need a guitar track. I don't know. We'll have to figure out the guitar track,
Sure.
but that's going to be in my tomato gardening song. Okay. Um, let's say I do that. The only person who will be amused is me, but I will be tremendously amused. And you know what? History will not end. History will not end. This is not the end of the world. This is not the technological dystopia if I do that or if you do that.
Let
Okay,
me,
I'm gonna pivot into a defense of Horning,
yeah.
but please.
Well, I just want to say one
Okay.
other thing. The thing that sort of sticks to me here is that you're going to prompt his latter points that we'll get to about the incompatibility of a text model and music in the way that these are trying to work, I think is valid. I'm not knocking them, and I like a lot of this, but to me, the only way that you can say, all right, what does my perfect tomato growing song sound like? Because it doesn't exist for me and I want it, right? And the one thing that all of these technological advances have done over the past 20 years, 25 years, has made us feel that we can have whatever we want right now.
Exactly. Right.
The thing about it is that in order to use this, you have to be aware of sympathy for the devil on a level that says, I want this part of it. You have to be aware of, who's he talking about here? Who was he talking about here?
He was talking about the Doors. He was
The
talking
Doors.
about
He was talking about Bob
National
Dylan. You have to
Skyline.
be aware
Yeah.
of the difference between
Yeah.
Bob Dylan's folk voice
and his country voice.
So you have to have an engagement with the originals that enables it. So it seems to me that here we are again with our, God, here we are again where our problems require the solution, right? Like you're not going to abandon music for this because, as you had said, nobody outside of Barry Falk cares. And you know what? When tomato growing season is over, my man, you're on to the next thing, right? So I don't see this. I see this as being at best fun, realistically probably just silly, and at worst distracting kind of toy. I don't know that this idea about AI generating silly songs about someone being late or my friend growing tomatoes is a problem, because ultimately, I don't have to listen to it to a point he's going to come up with later. This is never going to show up in my Spotify algorithm, and it's certainly not going to show up on the radio.
Well,
if it does show up on the radio, I'm sorry, if it does show up on the radio, or it does show up in the Spotify algorithm, it's because there's a demand for songs about Barry growing tomatoes, and then by God, I want to be a part of that.
And I would be delighted to hear. Michael, as you were talking, I got more excited about my Suno generated song as an aesthetic artifact.
Okay.
What you were really describing, I mean, if Horning took his argument to the ultimate extent, he should say, I also don't like Dada art. I also don't like surreal. I also, let's just say, I think Kurt Schwitters is a bad artist. And why? Because he's intelligently mixing media on his canvas. He's using an informed choice, but he's not creating out of a single medium. He's mixing and matching images. He's shocking our perception by giving us discrepant images. But he had to have the visual intelligence to know how to manipulate these elements and to find and select these elements. So no, you should not criticize Kurt Schwitters because he's an artist too, and he's making an artist choices. So there's that.
And that's fair. I think that Horning would respond by saying, sure, but with Suno, you're not the artist. You don't develop or refine any sort of technological know-how, any artistic skill, because all you're doing is saying, make me a jazz song about growing tomatoes. And so you're not, and I think this speaks to a larger problem about our engagements with music, where I think his concerns become very valid. So on the surface, I think it's fine to say, look, this is kind of silly. His problem here is about, I think, what it means to make music and what the purpose of that music is supposed to be. What service does music provide for us, right? So if it makes you or me or someone else giggle because look at what a stupid thing we enabled to happen by asking with musical prompts, there's no real techne to that. It's just, hey, make me a sandwich. Boom, here's a sandwich. Hey, make me a song about this. Boom. An artist who's mixing mediums is still an artist doing something. I think his problem is
Now there's no techne, to
right.
use that word. There's technology, but there's no
No
techne.
techne, right.
Michael, you already, I think you just made mincemeat of my example. And you've already started my pivot because, as I said, I wanted to pivot to pro horning after
Yes.
after criticizing him, and you already did that, I think, with a masterful reply to my argument. Now I want to go back to what I was thinking in terms of, like, the part of Horning's argument that kind of stays there
Yeah,
even
yeah, yeah.
after you criticize. Um, and it has to do with, I think, the he's making an argument that this technology makes is not fully satisfying. I mean, it's scratching our itch. It allows us to scratch an itch, but it is not developing our mental, aesthetic, spiritual, whatever capacities or physical. It's not even giving us a more pointed material engagement with the world. And so, shifting a little bit further in the argument, um, after his description, Horning pivots into, makes a couple arguments about what he thinks is the purpose, larger philosophical points, arguable, debatable, but cogent. He starts making some philosophical arguments about the purpose of music. And so let me read that. Let me read one of them because there, I think, his strongest arguments against this technology, and where he suggests that the long-term use of it, yes, it's fun. Yes, no, it's not really the end of the world, but he does feel that it's gratifying, that it can create maybe a bad habitual practice, and that it's a kind of habitual practice that fortifies, in a word, our narcissism. And why is it bad to fortify our solipsism, to use the word he used,
Hmm.
or our narcissism? Basically, it's because he believes music has a couple unique characteristics. One of them is the fact that music avoids representation. If we have time, maybe we'll talk about that. But I wanted to shift and read this one bit of his strongest argument about, I think, his one, or at least one of them, one of his strong arguments about the purpose of music. And for him, one of the things he doesn't like about this technology is that it is so catered to individual tastes, whereas he believes music is always an invitation to sociality, an opportunity for sociality. So I'm just going to read this one portion.
Before
I'll
you
shut up.
do,
Yeah, please,
because I think
please,
I know
please.
exactly where you're going. If it should be noted here that you and I did absolutely spent zero time corroborating which sections we're going to read, but I think I know where you're going. What I want to say beforehand, because it'll be a lovely surprise if you go somewhere different. I think when we get to this section of his argument, the
Yeah,
part that the part that you and I are going to take seriously, we're no longer talking about berry growing tomatoes, right?
right, right.
I think what he's looking for here is some music company, some corporation. This is no longer the sort of individual practice of humoring yourself. He's now talking about music that would be, and I put music in air quotes here, right? The use of Suno to create an actually distributed um, music, something that we would all have to hear, and why that would be a potential problem. Go ahead and show. Where were you going to go
Well,
with this?
I don't know. Maybe I was going to read a different passage, so we'll want to hear your passage. I was going to read a passage where he says, "You don't ever have to have been in a terrible band."
Oh, um,
You wanted me to start earlier?
No. Let me go ahead. Where was the terrible? Go ahead and read that, and because there's something after that that I think we can talk about. But go ahead. Show me what
Oh,
you're thinking.
Well, how about I read this paragraph? I know where you're going now.
Yep,
I'll
good.
read the
Okay.
paragraph and we can segue immediately into what you want to read. Okay. Um, so I'm reading this paragraph to illustrate the point about I think one of his strong arguments about what he thinks is the true purpose of music. And like, philosophically, he's making an argument. One could contest it, like any philosophical argument, but his argument is there is something about music that is an invitation to sociality. And that's what Suno is transgressing, and that would be the danger of Suno. So here's what Horning writes. You don't ever have to have been in a terrible band to understand that people like to make music, not because of the end product, but because of the process, which is an end in itself. Now, he's going to go on to say that process has everything to do with community
Right.
sociality.
Right.
All of practicing, I mean, this is the key line, all of practicing to make music, even if you're in a terrible band, all of practicing is about hanging out, about having something tangible and a structure having something tangible and a structure that an emerge. Oh, I got a
It's
little something cut
he
off
he
there.
was he was not careful with his
Oh, is that
spell
in your?
cheeking. Yeah, that's
Uh,
just this is
about something tangible and something that emerges from that. Perhaps that is romanticizing the experience, but okay, here's his key criticism. But the makers of Suno seem to assume that what people care about in music is not sociality and struggle and surrender to something that refuses to be mechanized, but a kind of control, individual control. I'll add that word to what he says. A kind of individualized, hyper individualized control under which you could consume exactly what you think you want and can call it making something. Suno invites us to see music not as made, certainly not made collaboratively, but as described, narrated, emerging not in the friction between performers and their instruments and between their imagination, but in the spontaneous, whimsical act of idle. I want to add this word again, idle individual curiosity.
right. So he's seeing the value. The problem with Suno, as he's describing it, is it becomes a friction-free process, right? You ask for something and you get that thing that you asked for. And his argument is that really there's a social component here which defies textual analysis because it's not the sound, it's the experience of making music. But if you go down just a little bit further, the next paragraph, he says it's conceivable that Suno or other tools like it could help people make albums that never existed. They can be harnessed and
Right.
subordinated to someone's imaginative intention and thereby engage other people. So look, this could be engaging, but it is inevitable that things like Suno will be especially used to make non-imaginative music, to fill in boilerplate spaces with music-like sounds. They will allow marketing technicians to fine-tune the deployment of sound to manipulate or sedate people, to extract somatic responses that might be mistaken for emotions, right? And so it is a cheap facsimile of the real, and that's his problem. Horning is really concerned with the experience of music. And if you go a step down, he says music works as a kind of proxy for sociality. It exists to harmonize people. And he's looking at Suno, he's saying there is none of that because it
There's that.
becomes this idiosyncratic experience.
AI is being used as slave labor. I mean, I think this is one of the things. Now, it's a kind of funny and glorified and a kind of interesting task, but it is still basically a menial task that we are a kind of the the AI slave is doing the bidding of its master.
Right.
And its master has this, kind of aesthetic whims. I think he used the word whimsical. There's a kind of whimsicality to it that sounds like oppression, right? Like it's an oppressive relationship.
So let me ask you, because I think this is a good time
Yeah,
to start getting to the door here.
indeed.
So here's my question for you.
Indeed.
I don't think that we are concerned, that Horning is concerned about fair labor practice for AI. Nobody cares that this is slave labor, right? So it's not an ethical question in that regard. His problem, I think, is that by utilizing a tool that is not capable of experiencing or expressing authentic emotion. This gets us back to Labatut again, the conversation we had, right? Mm-hmm. That by using something that can merely create the facsimile of emotional depth, we run the risk of creating simple, shallow, meaningless music. I'm going to tell you a story that's going to challenge this.
Let's do it. Let's hear it.
I taught in Japan for a while when I was younger. And I was friends with this kid who was he was from England, and I don't recall where, but he was the ultimate hipster. This kid knew all the music you didn't. He was capable of fashion choices that you didn't even know existed. I mean, he was bleeding edge of everything. And we were having when was this? This would have been 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. And we were talking about music one day, and somebody mentioned Dido. And he about lost his mind. The mention of Dido threw him into an absolute rage. I was like, man, this is a pretty strong reaction for music. Like, it's fine to say I don't like it, but this is pushing the envelope here. Like, what is your problem with Dido? And he looked me dead in the eye and he goes, it is the least offensive music that has ever been recorded. It is sterilized. It is safe. It offers nothing. He's like, I don't care about how catchy it may be. I don't care about how well it may fit into any particular mood. I don't care. It is not risky. It is not edgy. There is nothing here that is interesting. I don't want it. I don't want to hear. I'm done. Right. Mm-hmm. The conversation ended abruptly. It's like, wow, that's really something. But the idea that music is too safe. Mm-hmm. Dido sold a lot of records.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of that's to our friend Eminem and the song Stan, which he sampled her into. That's what put her on the map, essentially. Right. But the fact that actually sort of it makes this point stronger. Right. That kind of boring, simple, generic music sells and plays. Mm-hmm. And you can choose to not listen to it, or we saw in this case, Eminem sampled it into Stan and made something that was really kind of defining using something boring. So one, we're already making boring, generic music already. That's sort of what a lot of pop music has become. Is what's going to get us the earworm. We're already using technology to determine what that earworm is going to be. If we farm it out to slave labor, so what? Right? But it doesn't mean that that's where things have to stop. I get his point. I think he's right. And there's a problem. We don't want to just sterilize everything. But at the same time, aren't we kind of already there? And isn't the interesting music the stuff that's somehow not that? So I think, if anything, mm-hmm. there's a way of looking at this that says, you know what? Your Suno is going to be something to respond to. It's going to be something to get away from. Like, it just sets the floor. I don't see it as being a catastrophe or a huge problem.
So you're thinking that eventually it's going to lead. Okay. I think you've just given the final statement. I'm going to ask you a question.
I'm curious to hear yours.
Well, I don't know if I have a final statement beyond yours, except I want a clarification of what you're saying. And maybe, I think what you're positing is a thought experiment, that you're saying that, some of the things that he's complaining, if I understand your argument, you're saying some of the things that he's complaining about and and vehemently trying to attack, it's already been part for better or worse, of the pop music industry or the recording industry since, the 60s. Interestingly, he mostly talks about 60s artists, right? And talking and there's a kind of classic rockism maybe that's sort of implicit in it. But even in the classic rock era, we would have the kind of non-threatening music that you're talking about. So that he's making too much. All the technology is doing is casting a spotlight on tendencies that are already there in the culture, which arguably is all technology does.